All right, here we are talking about coaching. Hi, Nikki. I'm Yannick. How you doing?
Doing very good. Thanks, Yannick. Good to see you.
Shout out to Siva. She can't be with us today. Hope everything goes as well as it can, dude. With no further ado, we decided to jump very fresh into something that I'm currently neck deep in, and Nikki is like totally fresh with. So I'm like, oh, let's click record immediately, so we maintain the freshness of it. The question is around AI and reflective practice. I've been not sure when this is going to come out, but like I'm currently in the middle of developing a. Well, we'll start with a reflective practice buddy, and which hopefully will turn into some sort of AI supervisor. We had one in the lab. Some people might remember Rebecca Rutschmann, a colleague from Karlsruhe, who's big in the AI at the intersection of AI and coaching, connecting to all the thought leaders. It's amazing. She brought her quite fresh AI supervisor in, Eliza, and we saw Eliza helping somebody reflect on a recent coaching session. I actually stepped in. I talked to Eliza. This was the first demo of a speech-to-speech AI supervision model, trained on the 7-eyed model of supervision and the code of ethics and the EMCC supervision competencies. So, and it's done some really interesting stuff. Some way out there, and like, wait, I thought you were prompted not to give advice. Shall we brainstorm on this? And brainstorming with an AI is like, holy shit, there's little room for humans. But it wasn't supposed to do that. But still, the quality of what it offered was really good and really aligned with good coaching competencies. Right? Rebecca, I've done her training recently, and she shared with us a coach mentor system that they had fed all the competencies and the markers of ICF, and you can feed it a transcript, and then it gives you really good feedback. I talked to an AI recently just as a role play. I said, just to test the platform, and I said, hey, can I role play a coaching consultation, please? And so, with no other prompts, it offered me 2 different clients, and one of the clients was actually the kind of conversation I have quite often. Like someone who's earning good money, cushy 6-figure salary, missing a bit of meaning and purpose in their job, and wanting to transition into coaching. So I'm like, oh, let's see, let's compare, because I know the kind of person, right? And the conversation felt really natural. I talked, they talked back. I didn't see anyone, right? It was kind of like a phone call. I could tell it's an AI because occasionally a word is like a little bit out of sync, it's a bit weird. Like this is not human, but it said all the kind of things that a human would say in this kind of situation. Trying to prick my brains at first, try to, get some mentoring out of me. And then we had a contracting conversation around what this is and how this works. Like, it was a pretty realistic consultation. So I'm like, oh my God, like this. Let me start this way. Some people out there might know Harry Mack, who's a freestyle rapper, and he's just like 1,000 times better than the best freestyle rapper I've ever heard. And I've listened to a lot of people, just completely made up, all from the top of the dome, like just nothing prepared, nothing written, just completely freestyle. And it's amazing what the brain does. And at some point, I saw a video where he took people through his training routine. He would, set up a rhyme. Like, there's a word. He would like set. It doesn't matter what he did, but like, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, he's a former jazz musician, a former jazz drummer, and he's so used to practicing that he just practices so much, and he's been practicing for like 40 years. So that's why he's so insanely good. And watching that video, I'm like, coaches don't have that. Coaches can't really just practice at 2 o'clock in the morning or a Friday night when they need another person. They need a human to practice with, right? Because coaching is relational. Coaching is a conversation. Maybe there's some things that we can practice. And I thought like, oh, how do we practice? How can we, what's the equivalent of practicing your scales? But generally you need something. Maybe you can practice summarizing by listening to a movie and then pausing and then summarizing what you've just heard, or you can stand in front of a mirror or record yourself while you pitch your coaching packages. So there's a number of things you can do, but the actual coaching, you need a human being. And so with AI role play, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, here's your dojo. That is super, super cool. So, how can we utilize AI to become better coaches? Is the general question, right? To help us reflect on our practice. What I'm working on is a pre-session buddy to help you check in, just become present in the moment. Some coaches just do that. I think a lot of coaches would appreciate being invited to that. You know, hey, take a moment to sit with yourself. What's coming up for you? You
Mm.
know, what thoughts, emotions, sensations do you notice? How do you sit with your body, in the chair, or if you're sitting? Just listen in for a moment and notice if anything is with you. What's present for you as you're tuning into this is a question I ask almost all my clients in some way or another as we're starting a session. And I encourage all the coaches to do that before they go into the session. If we work relationally, that's so crucial that we need to be able to distinguish this feeling that I'm feeling, this impatience. Is it because of something that's happening in my life? Or is it something that is being brought here by the client? Is it something that I'm picking up on? Am I frustrated because of the fight I had with someone in my life or out on the street before I tuned into this? Or last week, it's still with me? Or am I noticing this frustration because my client is feeling frustrated and I'm picking it up relationally, here in the moment? In which case, that's important to work with. In the other case, if it's my stuff, it needs to go back in my box, right? So I think an AI system can invite us to think about those kind of things based on good prompting. When we come out of a session, I mean, wouldn't it be amazing to have 10, 15 minutes of supervision time after every single coaching session? It's completely unaffordable if you were to work with a human. But that's what we're currently working on, right? And I'm so excited about the possibilities of having a session at any point in time and just spending 10, 15 minutes afterwards reflecting on what just happened with a system that is trained in helping you reflect. It's not replacing reflecting with a human because the AI will not be able to pick up on that sense of frustration that is created relationally, right? The AI cannot do that. Maybe on some level in terms of language, picking up on nuances in language. So I think it's going to get better and better. But it can help us do, I don't know, 60% of the work, 80, 70. I can't put a number on it. But I think it can really help us sit with our session potentially in a maybe not more effective, but differently effective way. If it looks at your calendar and it prompts you on WhatsApp, let's say, or on your phone after the session is over, the scheduled time is over, then the coaches will be prompted to sit with that. So how many of you listening to this, after a session, what do you do? What's your routine? How many of you really take 10, 15 minutes to sit with that client after the client is gone, to sit with yourself in the client situation, take some notes, decide what you might want to take to supervision, notice what's happening, where's my growing edge, where were interesting moments that maybe in the moment were just kind of dismissed again. Read your notes again that you just took. What stuck out? What's with you? What are you curious about? What did you not get to ask? What might you want to ask next time you see them? What might you want to follow up on? If you could go back, you could do something different. What would you do differently if you could go back in time? There's a bunch of questions that are really helping you become a much better coach that a human supervisor or a reflective practice buddy would ask you that an AI could. So the question of how can we partner with AI to make us better coaches is a fascinating question to me. I feel I talked way too long to get your fresh perspective on this, but you said you haven't thought about this much at all. And I'm so curious with a fresh perspective, like, what do you think about that kind of stuff? Have you gotten in touch with this sort of thing? Is it something that you would use? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, wow. First of all, I think I've just like slightly had my mind blown, definitely listening to you. And you're clearly really passionate about the subject, which is contagious. And I think like I would have said, I started this conversation feeling a bit like, oh, AI, I'm not sure. I don't know. People here probably don't know me very well. I'm a bit of a technophobe to some extent. I like keeping things real simple. And the lifestyle I've had in the last years has been like aiming to remove myself from technology. But I'm conscious also like, that there's all these opportunities and possibilities and that it's the future and, you don't want to get left behind with these things. But instinctively, as soon as you started talking, Yannick, I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Like, I definitely would be very enthusiastic to kind of explore that. And I think the way you described it, perhaps as an outsider, made it sound a lot more realistic and human than maybe I'd expected and anticipated. You know, I'm aware of things like Chat GTP, and like now on Google, when I search things, it gives me an AI answer, and I'm always like, "Wow, that's like so spot on what I wanted to find." But that said, other than that, in my life, you know, and professionally and stuff, I haven't had any contact with it. What came up for me is a bit of a metaphor, which is interesting, is kind of actually surfing again, you know? Like in surfing, we have the ocean, which is a real and a wild environment. And then we have wave pools, which is like a perfect, predictable wave, you know, based on an algorithm, much like things like AI, I imagine, even if they're fed with like constantly adapting and growing information drawn from humans. I don't know anything about these things. I think it has, you know, to go into a wave pool, for example, has so many benefits because surfing, like humans, I imagine, is very unpredictable. You know, there is no algorithm that can capture all humans out there that we as coaches are maybe going to meet one day. But a wave pool can approximate based on lots of information, like common scenarios. And I think what you described about, hey, I had a client and they sound like so many of the clients I can often get. It seems like such a great opportunity to like develop routine and like go through some like base scenarios. And I think all of those things and practicing and rehearsing is such an amazing opportunity that, for example, I would love to have as someone who, you know, currently in the last years has been a bit out of coaching, but still with one foot in, but would have loved to have maybe some way of keeping on practicing. And from a supervision perspective, I mean, that also sounds amazing that after sessions, you have an opportunity to reflect and improve your own coaching. I think it's going to give a lot of people a lot more opportunity, yeah, to practice, like you say, get better. And that's really exciting for the coaching industry. I'm just really curious. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of thoughts I've had there. That's my initial
I'd
thoughts.
love to pick you up on the wave pool
You're keen to
metaphor.
say some stuff. Go for it.
Yeah. Imagine where wave pools will go in the next 10, 20
Whoa.
years.
Yeah.
Like, if you could go to your wave pool and say, I want to surf Chopu on the 18th of October 2012, because I know it was a particularly challenging environment. And then the floor of the wave pool would move around to create that kind of breaking wave that you can only get at that particular spot. And it's well recorded. So you can actually emanate it if you know, run the data and you study it more and you like, this is what's happening in AI at the moment, that, you know, people gather coaching scenarios. It's a bit tricky. You need to have ethical clearance that, you know, clients are happy with this data to be trained on. You know, for example, I did 6 sessions with a client that we did. I think I did pro bono, and the agreement was that I would be able to record it and potentially use it for training purposes or for other purposes of like trying to create something that is good for coaches, potentially make it public. And that person was very open and said like, I'm happy with that kind of arrangement. I'm quite an open book. I don't mind, you know, we only used first names, etc. So we have a ton of this kind of data. So you can actually, that's how the role play was able to create a pretty realistic scenario and able to respond to me like humans have responded in the past. Right? It doesn't necessarily create something new, but it can combine data sets in a way that you get a lot of different options, and you know, it becomes quite realistic because people have done these kind of things. You know? So that's incredible, right? If you imagine the possibilities of being in a practice environment, it does not prepare you for the ocean. Right? The best wave pool in the world will not prepare you for the unpredictableness of the ocean. And no AI system will prepare you fully for the unpredictableness of human beings. It will always throw you. But if you can prepare yourself for the 112 most common challenges that coaches have experienced, then, you know, that's an incredible training ground. So I know this goes much beyond reflective practice, but like as a training possibility, as something that can help us move towards more coaching mastery, that doesn't replace practicing out in the ocean in the real world with real human beings, but you know, can help us master our skills better. And then we take those skills out into the ocean And when it matters, when, in surfing, your life is on the line if you surf big waves. Out there, other people's lives are on the line when you coach real human beings. Maybe not as in a life and death. That's quite rare in coaching. But their life is on the line. Their life is in the room, and they might make significant decisions that change their life forever. Their relationships, their relationship with themselves, their paradigms. That's the wild ocean out there. But you can practice those skills. So then when you're out in the ocean, you're already like 70% there. You have a baseline of keeping yourself safe. If you know how to stand up on a board, then next time you're out in the ocean, you're making the most of your time. Because you don't have to practice the basics anymore. You already got some things down. It's already second nature. It's readily available. So I think those possibilities at the moment also blow my mind. So I'm now in that situation where I vividly remembered how the first time I was building websites and I wanted to throw my laptop out of the window like every 2 hours because I put something in and I followed the instructions and it's supposed to work because I've done everything right and it's not working and I know it's my fault, because the computer is logical and I'm flawed. I don't understand this, but I know that if it doesn't do what I'm telling it to do, then it's my fault for not telling it correctly. Right? So even I just don't have enough knowledge, which was very clear to me at the time. Like, other people can make it work. I can't make it work. I just don't have the capacity to understand how the system works to make it work for me. And that was super frustrating. So now as I'm prompting AI language models, like large language models, to train its supervision techniques, just nobody knows how it works on the back end fully. So I noticed that, I'm prompting in the correct way. And then 9 out of 10 times it does it. And the 10th times it just doesn't, and I just have no possible way to even find out what's wrong now. So there's lots of issues around how to train it and work with it correctly. But it's like, so there's a long way to go. That's the kind of jungle I'm in at the moment. But what I've seen already is already good enough to help coaches be better coaches. And that's fascinating. So Rebecca always says, this is the worst AI that we'll ever have. Because it keeps getting better. So if something is not working right now, like, this is the worst it will ever be.
That's okay. Interesting. Yeah. Makes sense.
Ooh. There's a lot there.
There is a lot there. No, it does sound really exciting. I would be well up for taking up that technology. One thing, though, that keeps kind of like, I also like to think of the balance of like the limitations and stuff. And it's like a part of me remains weary because I'm such a human person as opposed to technology and all of that person. Humans have feelings. Technology is just technology somewhere. At least that's my personal perspective on it. But
so you wouldn't go in a wave pool?
So I'm stuck in the UK now, but I say stuck, that sounds horrible. But like, I'm based in the UK, and as a surfer, I miss my ocean. Like, it's really part of my daily bread. And I'm like, okay, I can go to the wave pool though. And I'm like, it really doesn't appeal to me because it is so different. But I also see there's a lot I could gain from it. Like, to start with the predictability and like, in terms of honing in certain skills, that would take me years maybe in the ocean, what I could accomplish in days, weeks, or months in a wave pool. But that said, there is also a danger of moving between them. And I've seen this actually out surfing. You can tell when people have learned to surf in a wave pool because they don't have the same analytical abilities and reactivity to the unforeseen and to the moment, like that presence, because somewhere it does. What I'm worried or could imagine will be a challenge is that you run the risk of becoming a bit too comfortable and a bit too automated in certain routines that you repeat. And you're like, like that typical client scenario. And somewhere you will have to train yourself to maintain that kind of level of presence and awareness to still pick up on the nuances that makes individual, right? Like, it might become easy to miss certain things if we're not aware of the fact that, humans we deal with still, however repeated the scenario is, have their individual quirks. And it's the same in the ocean. The wave can look the same, but it is not the same. And other things are happening around it that if you're only trained to look for that one thing, you will miss all of the rest, and the rest is the 99%, not the 1%. So that's the only kind of, challenge that or one of the challenges I can imagine will
I can see
be important.
My surfing is snowboarding, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I when I was really big into it and my body was still unbroken, I followed a lot of the pros, right? So read the magazines and like watched some of the contests, and you would have this new generation of kids that grew up in somewhere in Norway. There's a few resorts that just they have three kickers, like jumps, and a lift that takes you what, a minute and 10 seconds to get up there. It was just a training ground that you wouldn't have when you go skiing or snowboarding in a normal resort, because at the time there wasn't a lot of these parks and jumps and rails, and like now every resort seems to be kitted out with lots of freestyle opportunities. But me and my brother, we learned on the side of the slopes, or we had to shovel. And so having such a training ground right in front of your door, and having a 5-minute walk to it, and then you can get so many jumps in on a day. And then in some parts of Norway, there's like some parts of the year the sun never goes down, so these lifts, they
Mhm.
operate for like 12 hours,
Wow.
or 16, I don't know, but like they just jump and jump and jump and jump. Of course you're going to get incredibly good at that particular skill of throwing a jump off a very cleanly shaped kicker. So that's you learn in a very clean environment. I remember I read a report of Shaun White, who's one of the most popular, most famous, and one of the best snowboarders who's ever lived. But he was a park kid, right? He grew up in a pipe, and then he had these perfectly clean training opportunities where he just did jump and jump and jump and jump and jump, and then somebody took him out into the backcountry, up a
Mhm.
big mountain with like waist deep snow and unpredictable terrain, and like changing snow conditions. And like he was a
Mhm.
fantastic snowboarder, but he really struggled, because
Mm.
it's out the wild ocean. So a lot of the stuff but he would still be able to throw incredible tricks off something, because he has that in his body. So the coordination, the upside down awareness, there's so many things that you can learn. You still have a transition out into the wild ocean, but
Mhm.
if you have a training ground and then you take it into the ocean, you're going to become much better, much
Mhm.
more rounded.
Mhm.
In surfing and snowboarding, I would question the purpose of why you're doing this, right? Because I don't think it's necessarily the goal of surfing to what is the best surfer. I think the
Mhm.
best surfer is the one who has the most fun and has the most meaningful experience,
Mhm.
right? I in snowboarding, that yes, you can compete and measure who's objectively better by giving it some competencies and some markers and then judge it, right? If you rotate more, that means you're better. But is it? Technically, it requires more skill. I appreciate that. But if it's about style or an
Mhm.
expression of self, or in being someone who inspires creativity, that it doesn't matter how many
Mhm.
times you spin it, other things matter. And so I think coaching, you can ask yourself similar questions, right? What does it mean to be a masterful coach? Not necessarily the most sophisticated technique. Maybe it's the quality of the space that you're holding and how you're showing up, and all that technique might go out the window when you're actually sitting with somebody who's having a difficult experience. So I think these are questions we need to ask ourselves. What actually is mastery? What is maturity in coaching? And to what extent does technique contribute to it? I have no doubt that there will be this next generation of park kids, who train coaching with AI like 12 hours a day. And then they become really good at some of the technical skills, and that will help them out in the wild ocean of working with
Mhm.
real people. you know there's also some things they might need to unlearn, or some things they have not been prepared for, or there might be some ethical issues. There will be some ethical issues around working, sitting with humans versus sitting with AI. But like there will be a new generation that will have access to these training dojos that the old guard of coaches will not have had access to. And I can already hear some of the voices out there who are very skeptical of AI, and at least a part of that is due to, on some level, I think, being jealous that that didn't exist and holding on to the old way of doing it. So there will be no doubt coaches who will lean into the humanity of coaching and refuse all technology being a part of that. And I respect it, right? I'm a vinyl DJ and I have been for a very long time. It took me many years to allow technology advancements to come into my DJing. I refuse to use Serato or other, I refused to beat match. There was tools, technology tools you could use that make some of the skills I had to learn, spend hours to learn. They made that skill obsolete. It was no longer needed. And part of me was jealous, but a big part of the vocal part of me was like, no, 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 no. You need to do it the real way, the human way, the way that it's always been done. Like, that's the tradition of the craft. You have to go through this process to really sit with the music and be with it. It teaches you something that you don't get when you can click a button or you can use technology to help you with it. And there's something to it. There's certain things we will not craft and hone the more we sit with AI instead of humans. There's a different quality to it. What's better, what's worse, I don't know. But it feels to me that some sort of combination to embrace the possibilities that this training ground offers and meaningfully integrate it and not lose the humanity of it. That seems wise.
I like that. And I also think it's not for or against, but it's how can we maximize the potential of using it to make our craft the best that it can be. And I think there's so many opportunities, and there will be pitfalls, and we will kind of, time will tell. I was just thinking there, it's a bit like for you with DJing, it's like for me in photography and Photoshop. Photoshop comes in and you can just take a picture, correct the lighting, remove objects. It's again, it's all that skill set that you've developed if you've learned it the traditional way. And yeah, again, I think there's great things. It's very time saving and certain things get done. And somewhere it's also, I think it means the overall bar will be raised. There will be a new baseline that will at least emerge when people are expected. There's no excuse for not having, basic skills down quite well, because that will just be the new normal. And then, yeah, I think it will therefore also raise the ceiling. And, I think it's exciting. It's opportunity.
Yeah. I think let's leave that here because, I'm super curious what people out there are thinking if you're listening to this. One thing I want to do is, if you wanted to play with a reflective practice buddy or an AI supervision system, again, I'm not sure when we'll release this episode. Right now, it's end of February. The next month, I'll work a lot more on it. I reckon by the time this will come out, I'll have something that can be tested.
Cool.
Right. So if you are a coach interested in the possibilities of reflective practice, AI-assisted reflective practice, as I would call it, then hit me up. Right. Write me an email, 42@existential.coach. And I reckon at the time that you're listening to this, I can probably give you access to a test version. More or less developed, we'll see, right?
Wow.
But I rely on very different kind of coaches testing this and letting me know what works, what doesn't work. Is there anything unethical around it? Because AI does some things that we might not be able to anticipate. Was it helpful? What else could we add? I reckon it's a community effort, right? We need coaches to really dig into it and feed it different kind of coaching scenarios, within the bounds of confidentiality. But the platform that I've partnered with, they're super ethical, hosted in Germany on German servers, which means GDPR and high level of ethical sensitivity. I've been looking for that kind of platform. It's so great that Levin created it, CoachBot. So yeah, if you want to be a part of that development, let me know, and that'd be. I think it's so cool. So curious to explore more the possibilities and also the limitations. And yeah, curious what people think. Is that something you would use? Is that idea I've had of, having a conversation with an AI after a coaching session, is that even desirable? Like, how many people would welcome that and find good value in it and, seek it? And how many people it's like, nah, I really don't want to invite technology into my coaching to that degree. So yeah, at the moment it's all fresh and new. So I'm curious to see in what kind of bubble I'm in, and who might challenge me on some of the things that I have shared today. Maybe I'm too enthusiastic. Maybe there's certain things that I'm not thinking about. Maybe I'm not enthusiastic enough, and there's lots of other possibilities. So yeah, please let me know. We learn more through conversations, as I often say. Anything you want to add?
No, beautiful. Thank you so much. That was great. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. See you soon. All right, that was us talking about coaching. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I appreciate your commitment to being the best coach you can be. I always say, if any of this resonates, make it swing. We grow through conversations. So if you found value in this episode, please go on and share it, or with another coaching colleague of yours or a friend. Anything that we can do to help people get inspired to reflect more on their coaching and be better coaches. I really believe in the generative impact that coaching has. So if you wanted to support the coaching and this mission, then what you can do is share this, right? Talk to somebody, send the link to someone, have that conversation with someone. What would really help us is to leave a positive review or a rating on one of the podcasting platforms. Generally, the more people we reach, the more time and effort we can put into creating these episodes for you. And higher quality means also more conversations, maybe inviting high profile guests into the conversation. That'd be a dream of ours. So you can make this worth it. And I appreciate you being with us, and I appreciate you considering to help. So thank you. See you soon. Send us a question.